Hello, good evening, and welcome to Monkeys with Fire. How is everybody tonight? Hope you're all well. So then, we're going to be taking a look at for me, a brand new role-playing game, but that has been out for a little bit, and we're coming in at this at an ideal opportunity because there is actually a crowdfunding campaign running for a supplement and additional books for this, so the timing is absolutely perfect. This evening we're going to be taking a look at the Magnus Archives. Primarily the core rules, but we'll also be taking a look at the player's guide. The Magnus Archives comes from Monte Cook Games, so our thanks to the team at Monte Cook Games for providing a copy of the Magnus Archives for us to enjoy this evening. Now, as we go through, we will hit upon some content that is going to be considered spoilers. So I will throw up the spoiler sign, just so that you are aware that if you are a player, you might want to stop watching at that point. But of course, if you are a GM, you'll want to stay to find out all the juicy details, won't you? So, before we go to the table, let's go and take a look then at this crowdfunding campaign, because it could be of use to you immediately. So here we go, the Magnus Archives RPG Tangled in the Web. There are only 8 days remaining at the time of this live show. It's already smashed its funding goal, as you can see. What's that? $709,000. So it's definitely backed. But let's find out what is on offer if you decide that you do want to get involved in the Magnus Archives. So we got a little bit of an intro, tells us a little bit about the podcast. That's an important point, is that this game is based on an incredibly popular podcast, and we'll learn more about that as we take a look at the game. Looks like there's 3 books that are on offer here. More horror, more options, more creatures and resources for the GM. So there's so much more to discover about the Magnus Archives. But what I want to draw your attention to is the fact that if you are new to the game, to which we are, then within this crowdfunding campaign you will get the core rulebook PDF for free. So that is fantastic. You can get all the new content and get the core book absolutely free. But in the here and now, you can actually download the free player's guide. So one of the elements we'll be taking a look at this evening, you can download and flip through the pages as I'm going through at the same time. So go and check out the Magnus Archives RPG Tangled in the Web on backerkit.com. Go and grab yourself the link and download the player's guide. And let's have a look. There's obviously lots of info. Different pledges. Lots of additional elements within the campaign. So it's definitely worth having a look at and see if it piques your interest. Good evening, Roger. We've just been having a quick scan at a crowdfunding campaign for the Magnus Archives, and just pointing out that you can actually download the free player's guide, and the player's guide is something that we'll be taking a look at this evening. So if you wanted to join along. But this is how you can do it. It's on BackerKit. If you just do a search for Monty Cook Games, then you'll find all of their campaigns, and this is the active one. There are 8 days left till the end of this campaign. It's already fully funded. So let's go to the table then and check out the Magnus Archives. All right, so here we go. As I say, we have, this is the core rulebook. We will be taking a look at that in a moment. And this is the player's guide that I have just been referring to. And both of these are available on the Monty Cook Games website to purchase right now. Just before we start, I'm going to go through the player's guide first, but I do obviously want to talk about the core rulebook, as we have become accustomed to from all of the previous releases that we've looked at from Monty Cook Games. The quality of this book is second to none. It's a really, really nice book. Nice, easy layout. Wonderful graphic design and illustrations throughout the book. We will take a closer look this evening, but I just want to give you an idea. It is a hefty tome at some, 384 pages, I think it's reading at, which is quite a lot, but of course this contains absolutely everything you need to be able to play the game. But we're going to take a look at the player's guide, because I think this is a wonderful sort of concise version of the rules that you can hand out to your players around the table so that they can create their characters and get started straight away and have a little bit of an idea of the type of game that they are going to be playing that evening. Oh, it's all scary, it's all terrifying. Let's go then to the player's guide. So I think this is maybe the first time Monty Cook Games have done something like this. A sort of concise version of the rules on a player's focus. I don't recall seeing anything like this on their previous releases, and that being the case, I think this is fantastic right off the bat. This is really handy because it is only 32 pages. That's it. So from a player's perspective, this is pretty much the basics that you need to know how to play the game and to create your character. And it covers it all in a really nice, concise way. Now, of course, because this is a Monty Cook Games title, it uses the cipher system. We, of course, have looked at great length at the cipher system and its various iterations, looking at all those wonderful white books, the genre books, that allow you to adapt the cipher system for whatever kind of game you want to play. And of course, horror was one of the books that we really enjoyed, because there's nothing quite like a good horror game, isn't there? But of course, the genre books allow you to create your own horror setting and use the cipher system rules to take your players into that world. With, of course, the Magnus Archives, it is based on a horror fiction anthology podcast that is very popular. And so you've already got the world created, and the cipher system, of course, creates the mechanics, the rules in which for your players to experience the world of the Magnus Archives. Now, I wasn't familiar with the podcast, much like when we took a look at the Old Gods of Appalachia, again based on a podcast, a very popular podcast. So this was great to be able to go and check out a podcast before I even started looking through the rules. I've listened to the first couple of episodes. I'm hooked. If you enjoy horror podcasts, I think you should add this to your list if you haven't done so already. It's definitely worth a listen. I know that I've only just scratched the surface, and so there's a lot more for me to listen to and to learn about the lore, but having gone through this, I can kind of get an idea of where things might be going, and that being the case, I'm very excited about it. Roger, are you a horror fan? Is it a genre you enjoy? So let's just have a quick read here. The Magnus Archives is a horror fiction anthology podcast examining what lurks in the archives of the Magnus Institute, an organisation dedicated to researching the esoteric and the weird. It follows the actions of head archivist Jonathan Sims as he attempts to bring a seemingly neglected collection of supernatural statements up to date, converting them to audio and supplementing them with follow-up work from his small but dedicated team. Individually, these stories, these statements, are unsettling. Together they begin to form a picture that is truly horrifying, because as one looks into the depths of the archives, something starts to look back. So, in the Magnus Archives Roleplaying, we take on the role of archival assistants assigned to investigate the strange occurrences reported to the Institute. And then it does detail a little bit about what this player guide is all about. So it provides important information for playing, a summary of the rules and the mechanics of the game, information on how to build, equip and use player characters, and other useful information for gameplay, such as basic setting information and a consent checklist and tips for playing a horror game. Of course, there are much more rules in the core book, but this is just enough to get your players started. Okay. Now, as it says, the core rulebook also contains information for GMs to run the game, including an extensive overview of the entities, monsters, books, artifacts, and characters that make the Magnus Archive so enthralling and terrifying, as well as some adventures to challenge and terrify players. Alright, now there's this little icon reference here that basically, as we go through this player's guide, it references pages within the core book. So this is great. You could have this, like I say, hand it out to your players, maybe as physical form or as the PDF, which you can get for free. And then, of course, they can just take a look at the core rulebook. I think that would speed things up, certainly for that sort of session 0. So I do like this. This is good. But this has always been something that Monty Cut Games has been good at, with their margin, having little call-outs, pieces of information that are relevant, leading you into different areas. So I've always liked that. So we get a glossary of useful terms. Again, it's got to assume that this might be the first time you're playing a role-playing game. Roger, not much on the horror, but you do like the concept of how the game is laid out. Okay, excellent. Well, let's see. So, as we know from the Cypher system, I've said this phrase many times. So each character has a simple statement that describes them, like, I am an objective noun who verbs. And so it gives an example. Jonathan Sims is a scholarly elocutionist. I've already started and I've not even got into the complicated words yet. Who solves mysteries. I should have gone for the top one. Martin Blackwood might be a nervous investigator who helps their friends. See, that's an easy one. I could have done that. So this sentence, the adjective is called your descriptor. Your descriptor offers a few modifications to your stats and skills. The noun is your character type. So if your descriptor is the sort of person you are, the type of core that you are, it's the fundamental way your character interacts with the world. And then your verb is your focus. So the focus is what your character does best. We've looked at this same setup for all of the Cypher system games, so we should be pretty good at this by now. I would well imagine that you are able to use the online character creator on Monty Cook Games website to be able to actually create your characters. I'll have to double check that, so don't hold me to it, but I imagine they would. They've been very, very good at putting in all of the descriptors and types and focuses for all their games and the genre settings, because each of those genre books adds additional ones into the mix. We go through character stats, explains your might, your speed, and your intellect. And then talks a little bit about skills, and of course pool, edge, and effort. As you can see, it's only small sections, so they've really tightened up how they are explaining the rules. With each sort of iteration, it gets better and better. So I think this is a really, really good place to start. And it reminds me a little bit, we looked at just before Christmas, the Cypher System starter set. I get the impression that they might have taken some of those ideas for that starter set and have applied them here for the Magnus Archives, or it could have been vice versa. But this is definitely a very easy way for a player to learn how to play a Cypher System based game. We've got a little section here on doing cooperative actions, and then talking about character tiers. So as your character improves with experience. A little bit about special abilities, ciphers, and artifacts. Of course, all of this is going to be detailed much greater in the core rulebook. This is enough for your players to just get a bit of an idea. Now, this area is something I think is unique to the Magnus Archives, and that's the stress. Again, like other popular cosmic horror role-playing game systems, sanity, stress, however you want to call it, when you see something you can't quite explain, it might cause some psychological damage, and so we need to have some rules and a system based around that. And this is what stress is within the Magnus Archives role-playing game, to which ultimately, if you take too many levels of stress, then eventually it can kill your player character. So you've got to be careful. You've got to be able to manage your stress, and alleviating stress, various points that you're able to do. So you can time in a relatively safe, relaxing space reduces stress by 3 points per hour. So eating or drinking, so maybe you go off to a bar, having witnessed the horrors that are out there. I'm going to turn to drink and to relieve my stress. I would not be recommending that. But interacting with a pet, maybe that's what you want to do. But if your pet's anything like mine, I think that just induces even more stress. Meditation, that's the way forward. Or interacting with trusted friends. These are all ways to be able to alleviate the stress. That's cool. Again, we've got some little points here in the margins for us to refer to. It then tells us a little bit about experience points and how players may gain them, typically through GM intrusions. Again, we're familiar with that from the other games that we have taken a look at. Of course, players can use their experience points to do a player intrusion, which is the opposite. GM intrusions cast a bit of a complication for a player to overcome. And if they are successful, then they are able to pick up a couple of XP. It's just a bit of a challenge in life as the story unfolds. But a player intrusion effectively is the opposite of that. It is a way of the players altering the situation to their favour. But it does say that an intrusion indicating that cipher just used as an additional use is inappropriate, but an intrusion that heals a character would not, because a player intrusion can do usually introduces a change to the world or current circumstances rather than directly changing the character. So it's got to be realistic what this intrusion is used for. Not suddenly giving your character amazing powers that they wouldn't have, but maybe, as it suggests, maybe an item that only had one use. Maybe you can squeeze another use out of it. Maybe it didn't use up as much battery as you thought it might have done in the first instance. Talking about character arcs. So this is a way of gaining XP as your character develops during the experiences and as the story unfolds. And give some suggestions for some character arcs. So what do we have here? You might aid a friend, or you might avenge someone, or defeat a foe, or finish a great work, or make a new discovery. Train a creature? Not sure about that one. Solve a mystery? Have a romance? So these are all things that you can give to your character as an arc that you're trying to accomplish, or at least, work down the path on accomplishing. So pretty much within, 16 pages, that's detailed the basic concepts of the game. It goes through at a fair pace, this player's guide, which is great. So actually playing the game, the core of gameplay in the Magnus Archives Roleplaying Game, the answer to the question, what do the characters do in this game, is investigate supernatural occurrences and gather knowledge, ultimately to attempt to hold back the machinations of the entities that threaten all of humanity. Now, it does call out that what happens if you've never listened to the podcast. Well, of course, you can listen to the podcast free on any platform that obviously offers up podcasts. I've started to listen to it during my morning runs because they are of the right sort of length that I can do my circuit and listen to an episode. So that's what I do during the week, and on the weekend I listen to the Silmarillion. That's my listening schedule. And as I say, I've just got started with it. The first couple of episodes, I really enjoyed. And I want to know more, which was much like when we listened to the Old Gods of Appalachia. They have a way of just bringing you on in and then not wanting to let you go, because you wouldn't have to listen to the next episode and the one after that and one after that. So they're very clever. So, as it says here, we are trying to gather knowledge about the unknown. So usually this involves a following up on a statement, and again it highlights the statement because this is a core aspect in the rulebook that's important in the game. The statements given to the Magnus Institute, presented by people who describe their supernatural encounters. So starting with the information in the statement, the PCs interview witnesses, search locations, look for supernatural beings, seek artifacts and books that might be involved, and record and catalogue everything they discover. As the PCs conduct these investigations, their skills and abilities improve, and their knowledge of the truth behind the supernatural entities at the very edges of our world increases. Encounters with the supernatural can lead to the characters gaining mysterious powers and even becoming avatars. What's an avatar? So in this horror game, the GM's main role isn't to build horrible foes to challenge the players, but rather to portray the ever-escalating terror of the stories that arise from the ongoing investigations. Fear is what the Magnus Archives is all about, and that fear grows from the rising dread and the realization of the implications of what happens in each session. In other words, it gets more horrific over time. It's not about jump scares, it's about the horror of learning the truth. In this way, the Magnus Archives is a sort of cosmic horror that means that knowledge can be more valuable than riches, but even so, some aspects of the supernatural are unknowable. Just be warned that with knowledge of the forbidden, there's often a price that must be paid. Knowledge is a dangerous thing. So that is a summary of the Magnus Archives, and I guess by listening just for the first couple of episodes, I couldn't help but get that feeling of, obviously, H.P. Lovecraft, Call of Cthulhu, also the X-Files. It felt a little bit, these investigation team going on out, investigating the strange, the unknown, recording it. Obviously, this is unique, but I was getting that sort of feel to it. And, of course, I really enjoy that. So we get some information about tips on how to play a horror game. And, of course, when we looked at the horror genre book, similar kinds of advice being given. As it said, this is a game where the horror builds slowly, gradually. It's not about jump scares, but the things that you might encounter are very, very horrific. And then it basically gives an element of what to expect when you play the game. So statements, interviews, research, exploration, and danger. In most investigations, there will be tight spots, frightening encounters, and life-threatening opponents. Yes, there will be actual monsters. Because of the nature of this being a horror-themed game, then we do have safety tools to make sure that everybody around your table is happy with the types of content that's going to be included. I guess, listening to a few episodes of the actual podcast would certainly help, but it's more about making sure that everybody has fun and gets, the horror should be at an acceptable level for what people like. What one person might enjoy, another might not, and we want to make sure that everybody is happy around the table. And then it jumps to creating your character. And again, I found this to be really, really good. This is a great way of being able to create a character really quickly. So creating your character in 5 easy steps. And I don't think you even need step 1. First, grab a pen and a blank piece of paper, or the character sheets that are at the back of the book. Choose from one of 4 types in Chapter 3. Follow the instructions provided for gaining your stats, abilities, equipment, and ciphers. Choose a descriptor from Chapter 2. Choose a focus from Chapter 4. And choose a character arc from Chapter 8. How easy can it get? But then we actually have some example characters, and these are characters from the podcast. So Jonathan Sims, the head archivist at the Magnus Institute. So as the story progresses, gains interesting abilities based on compelling people to tell their story. This makes him an obvious candidate for the elocutionist. Yes, I'm going to go with that. But we've got a few. He has a couple of different examples, since he's the main character. Martin has a couple as well. So we then have 4 different character types: an investigator, a protector, the elocutionist. I'll know this word by the end of tonight. Or the occultist. So come on, Roger. Let's see. We always enjoy creating our characters on the fly. What would you go for? So the investigator could be seen as the classic detective, but just as easily make a great model for a journalist. The protector is unquestionably physical and often trained combatants. The elocutionist is someone who's good with people. They use their words effectively, unlike me, but also read and emphasize with others. Whereas the occultist, so it says it would be easy but wrong to think of an occultist character as a fantasy wizard in the modern world. Instead, an occultist is someone with more than a passing interest in the paranormal. In this way, a character with any background could be an occultist. So, paranormal investigator. Just give a couple of examples. So investigator, you've got detective, reporter, writer, researcher, teacher. Protector could be a police officer, athlete, soldier, bodyguard. Elocutionist could be a manager, a minister, a priest, a lawyer, politician. And the occultist could be a paranormal investigator, a teacher, a writer, an artist, stage magician. You're going to go with the investigator, the traditional investigator. And what kind? Is it a detective, a reporter, a writer, researcher, teacher, scientist, doctor, or paranormal investigator? What do you think you'd go for? I think even though it would be a real pain for me during the entire play of the game, but if I went for the elocutionist and went for a media personality, I think that could be quite good fun. Maybe the idea of getting involved because we want to sort of debunk it, we don't believe it's real. I guess that's kind of a Scully, but Scully does it from a scientific point of view. I think this media personality would do it from a cynical view, and maybe trying to gain some sort of influence from it, and slowly but surely start to learn that actually what is happening is real. That could be interesting. Option references. We got character descriptors, character types, character foci, skill list. So again, everything we need to create our character. Now, before this, creating your character in 5 easy steps was referring to chapters again within the core rulebook. But we do have everything here, nice and concise, so you can quickly put your character together. And again, if it does follow the system on the character creation system online, then a lot of this is going to be really easy. It's just going to be clicking different menus and creating your character. We got a section on equipment. What type of things might we have? Now, I think I'm right in saying that the Magnus Archives is set relatively modern day, because they are working their way through old paper files that are all in disarray, putting them all onto cassette. So in fact, it could be, I think it's 1980s. Around that time, 80s, 90s. So in fact, let's just see, do we have a PC on mobile phones? Because mobile phones is usually a good way to determine where things are set. There's no mobile phone, so I think it might be 1980s. I'm going to double check, we'll go into core rules and we'll find out. We have a digital audio recorder, EMF detector, got night vision goggles, but no mobile phone. And we do have an orbital space station. That's interesting. Where on earth is this game going to go? Oh, here we go. Camera designed to be concealed, transmits over Wi-Fi. So that's making me think it's more modern day then. And a microphone. So yes, going to be modern day, isn't it? As soon as you get Wi-Fi involved. That's the one thing I haven't seen on here as yet, and maybe I went right past it. Actually, the year setting. So yeah. That's basically it. So once we have equipped our character, then they're ready to play. And this is an interesting little call out here about weapons. So I believe that the Magnus Archives is set in the United Kingdom. So, of course, guns, as it says in the UK, guns are heavily regulated through stringent licensing, background checks, and storage protocols. So they are not readily available. But as it says, a character whose game is set in the UK is a protector or might otherwise be expected to have access to a weapon. Could have one. Civilian gun ownership is allowed much more broadly in the United States, though regulated firearms are far more common, as are other weapons such as knives and batons. So yes, of course, you could set the game in the US. We got our consent checklist, which we've seen before, certainly in the horror genre book. This is a more detailed creating your character in 9 easy steps. It's added 4 extra steps, but again, we have our references here, and then we have some examples. Now again, this is really cool. I've spoken about this on other games that we've looked at where they don't provide examples of creating a character, but we've got all the sections in the character sheet all highlighted, all detailed here. I think that's great. And we basically have a blank character sheet. We have a Magnus Institute witness statement, to which we'll learn more about that in a bit. And then we do have a filled out character sheet. So this is really, really good. And it means you can get started straight away. So you wanted to be a detective, an investigator. Was this an investigator? No. Elocutionist, protector, investigator. So a scholarly investigator who explores dark places. Does that sound like your character, Roger? We have the occultist and another investigator. So 5 characters all set and ready to go. I've done this as quick as I can, but this player's guide is definitely worth picking up. And as we said right at the top of the show, you can get hold of the free PDF through the backer kit for the Tangled Web campaign that is currently running. So definitely grab yourself a copy while it's still active. It's live for another 8 days. All right, so taking a look through the core rulebook, initially, this is all going to seem quite familiar now, because we've already just gone through it. But we have our table of contents. So again, we've essentially done up to chapter 8. But we did it in 32 pages, and this goes up to 157. Oh, you're thinking your detective is going to be like Fox Mulder. Yes, you see, I can well imagine that there'll be a lot of Mulders out there. Even though this is its own original world, it was the very first thing that came to mind for me as I was listening to it. So, yes, here we go. Be forewarned, this book is filled with spoilers for the podcast, up to and including the very end. If you haven't listened to every episode and don't want the stories and revelations spoiled, put this book down and get to listening. So, I'm actually going to throw up the spoilers just in case, because I'm bound to mention something or look at something and someone's going to say, but I didn't listen to that episode yet. Oh my goodness. So we've already seen this, haven't we? The player characters, character stats, skills, edge, pool and effort. But of course now we're getting some wonderful artwork included here. Oh, that's nice. Here we go. Artifacts. Little note. We use the British spelling of artifacts because that's what the podcast does, and we just think it's cool. So yes, it is a British podcast. So yes, safety tools. Telling us about what the core gameplay, which we've already described. Character descriptor and skills. So already how we go about creating our character, but of course now we're getting explanations for all of these skill descriptors. This is what takes up all these pages, so each one of them has a little bit of text so you understand the fullness of what each of these skills can do. We then have our descriptors, which of course also give our game rules to each of these. Again, we've seen this in all of the other Cypher System games that we have taken a look at on the channel. Our character types. So we've got our investigator, and it looks at each of the tiers. You can take your character up to tier 6. Each tier, of course, they get more and more powerful's not quite the right word, but it is, you know what I mean, as far as they more experience, more skilled, longer in the tooth. We've got a nice example here of investigator. I always like it when games include examples. I think that's so important. Sometimes it's not enough just to read rules, but to have an example of how they're being utilized is very helpful. Ugh, yeah, we're getting past that page. Now, I wonder, well, I'm going to assume it as much, that all of the artwork that we see here are scenes from the podcast. And so if you have listened to the podcast, then these will be resonating with you. At the moment, they're just good pieces of art for me. But at some point, I hope that they will mean something. Character focuses. I do like the style on this. I'm just moving through this relatively quickly because, as you can see, there's a lot of pages on all of these focuses. My goodness. Hairy on the inside. For 10 minutes your form becomes more bestial and you gain a +8 to your might pool. Do you become a werewolf? I do like, as I'm going through this, how near enough every page has a little illustration, a little piece of graphic. I think that's really important. Let's just, we've still got that orbital space station. I want to find if we've got, no, this is exactly the same. Ah, here we go. Laptop. I maybe missed that. So it makes me think, oh, here we go. Budget cell phone. So I think I might have missed it initially. So we have our ciphers. And again, we get multiple pages on that. Oh, goodness me, look at that. Eek. And then we get to the rules of the game. So, again, we've gone through this many, many times. Task difficulties. So, we are trying to roll... Oh, got to remember. Hang on a second. I think we have to roll under, don't we? Am I right? Recoil, essence, where is it, where is it? There we go. Oh, sorry, no, it's roll higher. So, to succeed at a task, you must roll the target number or higher. And this is on a D20. Because, yes, of course, because that's the point, isn't it? Is that when you get up to a task difficulty of 7, a formidable task, your target number's 21. So, of course, you can't achieve it as standard on your D20. And this is where you use... you can use your ciphers to modify the difficulty. And you can use your skills. And basically this, there's a phrase, what is it called? Oh, I'm looking for it now. Essentially, you basically bring the difficulty down level by level. So that you become easier. So you formidable, intimidating, challenging, difficult. If you get it down to a 12, you've got a fair chance of being able to roll that. Oh, there's a phrase that they use all the time, and I can't find it or think of it now. That's so frustrating. It will come back to me as soon as we finish this show. More in-depth detail on GM intrusions and player intrusions. Now this is something. Horror mode. So in times of escalating tension, the GM can activate horror mode. In an investigation, horror mode can be activated when the PCs encounter a specific creature or person, but it's usually activated when they enter a particular location. So during normal play, PCs interact with each other and the NPCs investigate, research, travel and so on. When they enter a house affected by the spiral, the avatar of the hunt gets close. The minions of the buried, oh gosh, beneath the earth awaken. So this is a cue for players to recognise that things are getting bad. It's the RPG equivalent of a spooky music beginning to play in a horror film, or a changing in Johnny's voice when reading a statement. The idea is to create a feeling of escalating dread and menace by changing one die roll mechanic. This is the important bit. When horror mode is first activated, GM intrusions occur on a natural roll of 1 or 2 instead of just 1. Horror mode heightens every time a player's roll indicates an intrusion, and whenever a GM feels that the danger in the story escalates. So this is kind of cool that you can sort of, put that filter on, and the mechanics are then enhancing the chance of horrific things occurring. So horror mode heightens, so you can have a roll of 1 to 3 and 1 to 4 and so on. That's kind of cool. Nice way of letting your players know that real spooky stuff is happening. That's it. Hinder and ease. I'm sure that was the phrase. So you're basically easing the difficulty or hindering it. Easing it, making it easier. Pretty sure that was it. More and much greater detail on stress. As you can see, we got a very cut down version of it in the player's guide, but this, yeah. But this details and alleviating stress. But what I want to do is I want to just jump to, we got the character arcs. Giving you some examples. So again, a lot more detail. So this is chapter 9. So essentially, all of that is what we covered in the player's guide. So in 32 pages, you can see just how much more detail is available for the same information in the core rulebook. So this is interesting, the statement. So if you played a tabletop role-playing game before, you can of course play the Magnus Archives in any way you've been accustomed to. The Magnus Archives podcast suggests a new opportunity as well. Just as nearly every episode begins with the recording of a written statement in which someone relates the details of a potentially paranormal experience they had, your own stories in the game can begin with a statement as well. So this is interesting. So the GM summarizes or reads aloud the text of a statement that begins the investigation for the PCs. The GM could even use the statement of an episode of the podcast, or write up a statement and hand it out to players, or perhaps go so far as to record the statement on their phone or other device. I like the idea of that. But as integral as statements are to the podcast, perhaps some people could find it appropriate to have the group work together to create a statement. This is what I really like. And so it goes through the process of all of the players around the table actually creating this statement. You do need to listen to the podcast to basically get an idea. And what the statement is essentially an occurrence has happened, somebody has gone and taken this person's encounter as a statement and just written down the story as they're sort of telling it. And I think this is an interesting way of them bringing the group together to build upon creating this statement. It's different. I like the idea of it. Everybody gets to put in their little say into what this statement's going to be. I mean, it's a different way of playing your sort of session 0. And of course, I suppose it helps the GM a little bit to have an idea of what type of game they want to actually play. So from a consent point of view, everybody's on board, aren't they, as far as, okay, these are the elements that we want as part of this particular game. So I like that. I think that's good fun. Locations. So this really is part of the spoilers. This is the entities. again, because I don't quite know the fullness of the podcast, this is something we're going to learn about as you listen, but here and now doesn't mean so much. So I'm going to just skip past it a little bit, because I don't want to necessarily ruin it for you guys or for myself. But we get to chapter 11, A World of Fears, and this is where we start to get all the information on what is the Magnus Archives. Of course, it's just giving you all the lore. So, as we've spoken about many times with role-playing games, if a game is based on a subject that you are a fan of, role-playing games are great additions to have for part of that fandom, because they go into so much detail and maybe touch upon things that you weren't aware of as part of the actual topic itself. I do always remember, oh gosh, I mean this is going back a bit now, but one of the original Star Wars role-playing games, because there was only the 3 films at that time, and a lot of things in Star Wars never had a name. When they created the role-playing game, they had to give names to all of the ships that just were there as models in the movie. And of course, the role-playing game actually made those names canon. And now, of course, they are referred to as if they were always named that. So, role-playing games are great resources to have if you enjoy the subject that it's talking about. So ultimately, if you are a fan of the Magnus Archives, this is definitely worth getting hold of. Monsters and NPCs. What type of monsters might we encounter? Now, I can definitely highlight this one, the Anglerfish. The anglerfish lures victims into the darkness to steal them and their skin. Someone's creeping sense that something's wrong may save them, but not from the horrific memory. So this is one of the very first episodes of the Magnus Archives, and something that I really appreciate. I'm just going to make sure I get this right. Yeah. See, this is a role-playing game based on a subject done well. Because, and I'm always pointing this out with many of the games we look at, podcast characters by name. You know a character in the podcast. You want to find them in the book. Where are they? Here they are. You just got the name. You've got the page. Away you go. Each of these monsters or NPCs, there's a little piece, a snippet from that particular episode that featured that character, and it tells you the number of the episode. So the Anglerfish is episode 1. That's great. That is really good. It's a shame so many other games don't do it. So this little attention to detail is really good. Credit to Monty Cook Games for thinking ahead and doing that. Granted, of course, that Anglerfish is episode 1. I can only look at things that are going to episode 2 and 3. But we have got episode 56 and 49 and 80. So you get the idea that I've got so much to listen to. 142. Oh my goodness. This is a big series. But hey, that's good. Gives me something to listen to as I'm running. Good thing about them is that the episodes, they're only about 20-30 minutes long. So they're not too long. This is great. This is really, really good. Again, if you are listening to the podcast, this will all jump out at you. For me, it's just interesting, different kinds of creatures or characters that you might encounter. And this is where the Magnus Archives sort of has its own little niche. If you've played other cosmic horror games and you've got to the point where I think I've seen and done it all, then this hopefully is going to give you something new and different. Oh, Squirm, episode 6. So that's a real spoiler for me then. That's coming up soon. These are cool. Oh, vampires. And the artwork is beautiful. Really, really nice. 147. So it must be about 150 episodes. That's a big podcast to listen to, isn't it? So, artifacts and books. Variety of different artifacts that our characters might get, but of course, there's always going to be a problem with these. And again, excellent. These are referenced in the podcast. This is great. This is really good. Let's skip through this. And so we get up to actually running the game. Notes for the GM. What the GM's role is going to be. I always find this is very helpful if you were new to role-playing. The way that they write this section really does help new GMs. Lots of examples. Lots of guidance. Of course, the team at Monty Cook Games have got years and years of experience and have created many systems using the Cypher system, so they've just refined this more and more. So pretty much this is all your GM section. Quite a bit to it. Again, detailing how to run a horror based game, adding tension and the unknown, describing horror, which this section is all very useful even if you are an experienced player, but to get GM, but to learn about how you might want to present a horror themed game in a different way than what you might already be doing. And then we have an example of play. And then we have a couple of adventures, which again, because of the nature of this horror-based game, we do have our content warnings, which of course is important. We're going to skip right past these because we don't want to ruin them. So again, more content warnings. Lots of gruesome things. And right at the end, in a section called Back Matter, we have that creating your character 9 easy steps. And then recommended resources. So to get a bit of an idea of the types of material you might want to watch or be familiar with for setting. So Silent Hill 2, Alan Wake, Until Dawn for video games. Of course for RPGs, anything Lovecraft, Delta Green, World of Darkness, movies, The Thing, The Lighthouse, Event Horizon, TV shows, Twilight Zone, Gravity Falls. So plenty of resources to check out. We've got a Magnus Institute witness statement that your GM might fill out, or you might fill out as part of the team. And then, of course, you've got your character sheet and your consent checklist at the back. And a handy index, which is always very, very useful to be able to go through. So there you go. So that is a quick look through the Magnus Archives Roleplaying Game from Monty Cook Games. As I've been saying, this is great. I already know that the Cypher system is a wonderful set of rules to which to hang your theme upon. I already know that Monty Cook Games have explored horror themes before with the Cypher system, having their genre book, and then most recently doing the Old Gods of Appalachia, another horror podcast. And this is no different. This is a great addition. If you like your horror games, you're going to enjoy this. And if you are a fan of the Magnus Archives, you're going to enjoy it. If you like Cthulhu-based games and you want to try something different, then yeah, I would definitely give this a try. Certainly, as we've pointed out numerous times, you can get hold of the Player's Guide for free on the BackerKit crowdfunding at the moment. Go and do a search for the Magnus Archives, called Tangled in the Web. And you can go and download this and get a bit of an idea, create your character in advance. You can even then, if you did back the campaign, you can get hold of the core rulebook as a PDF absolutely free of charge. So that's really, really worthwhile doing so if you want to try something different. So there you go. That is the Magnus Archives. Now, next week, we've dealt with cosmic horror and things that are terrible in the darkness. But next week, we're going to be continuing with another of Monty Cook Games' recent releases. We are going to be taking a look at Tidal Blades, the role-playing game. If you have been a regular follower of the channel, you'll know that we actually played a Tidal Blades board game possibly about 2 years ago now. Do you remember that game as we were going around on jet skis collecting wonderful fruit? Yeah, this is the role-playing game set in that same universe. So I'm very much looking forward going through this, because one of the standout features to Tidal Blades was the absolutely amazing art done by the creative art team of Mr. Cuddington. So that is going to be our game for next week, which will be on Wednesday evening. So I do hope you will be able to join me for that. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's show. Please leave a comment in the video if you've listened to any of the Magnus Archives? What do you think of the show? Have you enjoyed it? Of course, don't put any spoilers in. Don't want it ruined just yet. If you've backed the current crowdfunding campaign, if you've played the game, let us know what your experiences were like. Alright, and folks, thanks very much. Look forward to seeing you next week. But until then, bye for now.